Hi everyone, I'm Paul Krugman, professor at the City University of New York, based at the Stone Center for the Study of Socioeconomic Inequality. I'm the author most recently of Arguing with Zombies, Economics, Politics, and the Fight for a Better Future. And I've been asked to talk for a little bit about the implications for the world, for the world order of the COVID crisis. And so I'm going to try and talk a little bit, not about the immediate economic and, of course, epidemiological issues, of which I am not an expert, but I have some thoughts about the economics, but I think I want to go beyond that and ask what will this do to the world we live in, looking out at some point a year or more from now when the pandemic has passed, but it will clearly have led to an alteration in the state of the world. I find that to talk about this, it's useful to compare and contrast the pandemic with the last crisis. We had an extremely severe financial crisis in 2008, which was followed by a number of aftershocks, including the Euro crisis of 2010 to 2013, which you might have expected would lead to big changes in the world order, big changes in institutions and in relations between countries. After all, that crisis was pretty much generated by underlying problems, problems in the way that we had structured financial institutions, problems with the incentives that our system created. You might have thought that we would have ended up in a very different place. We didn't. There were obviously some implications. I think that in particular in Europe, elites took a hit to their prestige because of the crisis, and that in turn helped to lead to a lot of other things, including ultimately Brexit. But overall, the global system remained surprisingly unchanged. It remained in many ways a system of rules. The outbreak of the world trading system did not break down. Protectionism was remarkably restrained during the crisis. It remained a system in which the United States was a soft hegemonic power. U.S. influence in the world remained pretty much the same as it had been, if anything increased, because the troubles in Europe had reduced the ability of the European Union to serve as an alternative pole of power. And so the 2008 and following crisis did not lead to big shifts in the way the world was organized and the way the world worked. I believe that the COVID-19 crisis is going to be quite different. It occurs against a different backdrop. It's led to some very, very different psychological, perceptual changes in the world. Obviously, it's a very severe economic shock, and we don't yet know. We have a pretty good idea of the severity initially, but we don't have a good idea of how long it will last, and that's going to depend a lot on how the epidemiology unfolds. But it has exacerbated, maybe brought forward some things that were already happening and really increased some of the crucial fracture points. It's likely to lead to a world that is much less integrated at least in a political sense, and possibly in an economic sense as well. So let's talk about first about the institutional. The most obvious place of strain in the world has been on the part of the international system that has, for the past half century, been the most successful. The world trading system, the GATT and then the WTO system of rule-based international trade, with not totally free trade globally, but relatively free trade, and more important, with any moves towards protectionism constrained by a set of rules. That was already under severe strain before COVID hit. And it was largely the result of reduced interest and commitment to the system by the United States, which created the system in the first place, but elsewhere as well. So you saw that the general notion that freer movement of people, of capital, of goods across borders was a natural tendency being rejected in many places. So the Trump administration's protectionist moves, but also Brexit, also just increasing questioning of the system. And we were well on our way towards a breakdown of much of the mechanism for that system before COVID. But now, much, much worse, because whatever residual trust between countries there was, and the WTO system relied on willingness of countries to trust each other's willingness to abide by rules, their good faith. That has been massively hit. In particular, of course, there's the U.S.-China confrontation, which was already looking fairly serious, but it was, I would say that as of the beginning of this year, it looked possible that we would find a way for both sides to declare victory and make peace, that we would end up with a largely cosmetic deal between the U.S. and China, and that we could get the system back on track. Now that with two countries blaming each other for mishandling the pandemic, which fair bit of blame deserved on both sides, but then with an underlying backdrop of conspiracy theories and just general, let's make someone else bear the penalty. It's very hard to see that happening. So that the sort of centerpiece of the international system for international trade has really been falling apart. And hard to see how that gets put back together, because the underlying tensions were there to start with, and now they've been broken way out into the open. Beyond that, the WTO is the most important, most successful of international institutions, but all the others are now very much under threat. So I'm recording these remarks just after the U.S. administration suggested that it might cut all ties with the World Health Organization. Now, if there was one organization that seemed not to be a source of great dispute, it would have been the WHO, because pandemics are global affairs. WHO is not purist. It has been accused with some justice of deferring to powerful players, but still, WHO is the epitome of a professional technical organization where there shouldn't be big conflicts of interest among countries. But now, because the WHO is a potential candidate for blame shifting, suddenly we have the WHO. If ever there was a global public good, it would have been on health issues, but the WHO is under severe challenge. And so that means that we're seeing international institutions in general, even those that you would have thought were most immune to global conflict, being undermined by the effects and the political fallout from COVID-19. So this is a world in which it's going to be very hard, even once the pandemic lifts, it's going to be very hard for countries to return to the kind of good faith negotiating trust in each other that is essential for any kind of global system to operate. Then there's also an effect on the credibility of different systems. So we've lived since World War II in a world in which the United States played the role of a stabilizing hegemon. The United States, not perfect, and gradually diminishing weight in the world, so it became a little bit harder for it to take this role. But still, the United States was the leading economy and also had a great deal of soft power. The the world, whatever it might say, respected the United States as as a power whose word could be trusted, that could be relied upon to act in a at least mildly benevolent fashion. The rivals, in terms of sheer economic weight, the United States has two rivals, the European Union and China. Neither of which, however, was credible for taking on the role of hegemon. Europe, because it's too disunited internally. The EU has historically been able to more or less punch its weight in trade policy, but not on anything else. For a little while, it looked like financially it might have become a sort of co-equal of the United States, but the fragmentation of the euro of the euro bond market, of the euro financial system, means that it is no longer really in contention. The euro is not ready to replace the dollar as an international currency, or even to sort of coexist with it on any kind of a level playing field. And China is a huge power, but to really play the kind of role that the United States has played for the past couple of generations, you need to be a power that other powers that everybody expects will follow rule of law, will behave in a way that means that its word can be trusted. It can be trusted not to take short-term political advantage of its position. And that remains true of China. The big change is that America now looks like that too. We no longer have a highly credible power in the form of the United States. And in fact, the United States has the mishandling of the COVID crisis, the sheer dishonesty and failure to act effectively on the part of the U.S. government has done enormous damage to American, prestige, but not so much prestige. The important thing is credibility. I said the U.S. had a great deal of soft power. Well, not anymore. These days, America doesn't look like a place you want to emulate, admire, be tied to. And in terms of actually handling the pandemic, once it became clear, unavoidable, that it was serious, well, China has been more effective than the United States. So that the time when the United States could, in effect, appeal to the world because America was a country that knew how to do things, and you could say, look, we have rule of law, we have democracy, and we're also effective. Well, we don't seem to have so much rule of law anymore, and we're not effective. So there's a major shift. I think that China has emerged with greatly enhanced power in this vague but real sense of having prestige and credibility relative to the United States, but China inherently is not capable under the current regime of fulfilling the role of being the global stabilizing force. The United States had those things, but has thrown them away. And even if there's a shift of political power in the United States in November, you don't get it back. America will be the country where someone like Donald Trump could, in fact, run roughshod over all of the rules. And that's going to be a huge problem going forward. So I think we're headed for a much weaker, much more chaotic world order as a result of COVID. And that's going to haunt us for a long, long time after the virus itself has gone away.